Sit still. Don't touch anything. And don't pretend you belong where you clearly don't." The words cut through the first-class cabin like broken glass, loud, deliberate, and meant to wound. A few heads snapped up, a few smiles flickered, ugly and complicit. The man delivering them wore 4 stripes and a practiced sneer, the kind that had learned how to hide behind authority. "You people always test limits," the captain continued, voice soaked in sarcasm. "Always pushing, always looking for a free upgrade, a handout, a headline. This isn't a bus station, this is first class." The boy didn't move. He sat upright in seat 1A, hands folded loosely in his lap, eyes forward. The cabin hummed with the steady confidence of a commercial airline at cruise altitude, but the air around him felt tight, pressurized by something far more volatile than physics. A woman in 2C whispered, "Oh my God." A man across the aisle lifted his phone, just a little. The captain leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough to sound reasonable while still being heard. "You want to use our restroom? Up here?" He gave a short laugh. "No, that's not how this works. There are standards. And frankly," his eyes dragged over the boy's hoodie, his skin, his stillness, "you don't meet them." This was no misunderstanding, no bad day. This was intent. Malik Johnson, 16, black, deep brown skin, slim build, neat low-cut hair, sat perfectly still. A high school junior, honor roll, quiet by nature. Raised to say yes, sir, and no, ma'am, even when the world did not say it back. He had boarded the flight legally, ticket scanned, seat assigned. He had asked politely to use the restroom closest to his seat, the one designated for first class. He had not raised his voice. He had not broken a rule. He had not done anything wrong. Across from him stood Captain Grant Whitaker, 47, white, tall, rigid posture, ironed uniform sharp enough to cut. 23 years in the cockpit. Known for discipline, known for standards, known quietly for complaints that never seemed to stick. Whitaker straightened and addressed the nearby flight attendant like Malik wasn't even there. "Per internal guidance, this passenger is restricted from accessing the forward lavatory. Enforce it." The flight attendant hesitated. "Sir, we're in cruise. Airline policy doesn't—" Whitaker snapped his head toward her. "Did I stutter?" Silence followed. Heavy. Public. Then Whitaker raised his voice again, this time pitching it to Carrie. "First class isn't a costume party. You don't just sit here and expect the perks. There are people who pay for this space. People who earned it." He let the implication rot in the air. Malik finally spoke. Soft, controlled. "Sir, may I ask which airline policy says I can't use the restroom near my seat?" "A mistake." Whitaker smiled, thin and cruel. "Oh, now you're a lawyer?" He chuckled. "Figures, always playing the victim, always quoting rights you don't understand." He tapped the overhead bin with one finger. "Let me make it simple for you, son. Passenger rights don't mean you get to roam wherever you want. They mean you sit down, keep quiet, and follow instructions, especially when you're lucky enough to be up here." A man in 3A muttered, "Unbelievable." Someone else whispered, "Is this allowed?" Whitaker heard none of it, or pretended not to. He turned to the flight attendant again. "And while we're at it, no water service for him until further notice. Headphones too. Safety concern." Malik looked up. "I'm not a safety concern." Whitaker leaned in close, voice dropping, venomous. "Every problem starts with someone who says that." The flight attendant swallowed hard and reached out, slowly, apologetically, to take Malik's headphones. Her eyes said, "I'm sorry." Whitaker said, "Learn your place." This was the conflict. Immediate, unmistakable, unfolding in full view. Phones were no longer subtle now. A red recording light glowed 2 rows back. A woman shook her head, lips pressed tight, torn between fear and fury. The aisle felt narrower, like the plane itself was leaning in to watch. Malik did not flinch. Instead, he unlocked his phone, opened a blank note, and began typing. Dates, times, exact words. He placed the phone face down on his tray table, as if setting a marker, as if saying, "This moment matters." Whitaker noticed. His smile faltered for half a second. "What's that?" he snapped. "Notes," Malik replied evenly. "So, I don't forget." Whitaker scoffed. "You'd think that's going to save you?" He straightened, voice rising again, reclaiming the room. "Let me be clear. If you don't comply, I'll have you moved to economy. Or worse, I'll write you up as disruptive. We can land this plane if I decide you're a threat." A murmur rippled through the cabin. Land the plane? The threat wasn't subtle anymore. It was a hammer. Malik met his eyes for the first time. Calm, steady, not defiant, resolved. "I am seated," Malik said. "I am quiet. I am following instructions. I am simply asking to be treated according to airline policy." Whitaker laughed. Sharp, ugly. "You really don't know when to stop talking, do you?" He turned away as if the matter were settled, tossing one last line over his shoulder. "Some people just need to be reminded of their place." The words landed. They always did. But this time something else landed too. A shift. The kind that happens when cruelty goes too far, too publicly, and witnesses begin to understand that what they're watching isn't authority. It's abuse. The engines droned on. The cabin lights glowed warm and indifferent. And somewhere behind Malik, a passenger quietly started an audio recording and titled it with shaking fingers. ATL SFO. Captain's statement. Lavatory denial. The trap had been set. If you have ever been judged, humiliated, or denied basic dignity simply for existing, then what happens next with this captain will make you furious, and then quietly hopeful. Don't forget to like and subscribe and stay with Dignity Voices to follow what happens when silence becomes evidence. The captain thinks he still has control. He escalates and unknowingly pulls the first thread that will unravel everything. The captain thought the moment had passed. From the cockpit doorway, Whitaker scanned the first-class cabin with the satisfied stillness of a man who believed authority, once asserted, naturally hardened into obedience. The boy in 1A sat where he had been told to sit. Quiet, hands visible, head forward, no shouting, no spectacle. Good, Whitaker thought. Lesson delivered. But silence, he would soon learn, was not surrender. The lead flight attendant moved down the aisle with a practiced smile. That barely reached her eyes. She stopped at Malik's row, lowered her voice. "Sir, are you comfortable?" Malik looked up. "No, ma'am." The word landed softly, and yet it echoed. Before she could respond, Whitaker's voice cut in from behind her. "He's fine." The attendant turned. "Captain, he hasn't had water since—" "He doesn't need it," Whitaker interrupted. "Not until we're sure he understands boundaries." A couple in 2D exchanged looks. The man whispered, "Did he just say that out loud?" Whitaker stepped fully into the cabin now, making no attempt to keep things discreet. He wanted the audience. "We're not running a daycare up here," he announced, "and we're certainly not entertaining entitlement." Malik inhaled slowly. "Captain," he said evenly, "I've remained seated. I've complied with every instruction. I'm requesting water and access to the restroom near my seat, which—" Whitaker raised a finger. "You don't get to make requests right now." A pause. Then, with calculated condescension, "This is how it usually goes. You push. We say no. Then suddenly it's discrimination or feelings or some viral video. I'm not playing that game today." The word usually rang louder than anything else. A woman 2 rows back whispered, "Did you hear that?" Whitaker gestured to the flight attendant. "Stand by him." She froze. "Sir?" "Stand. By." "Him," Whitaker repeated. "Let him know he's being monitored." The attendant's jaw tightened, but she obeyed, positioning herself just off Malik's shoulder like an apology turned into furniture. Malik looked up at her. "I'm not doing anything wrong." "I know," she whispered back, barely audible. Whitaker watched the exchange, lips curling. See? Even she knows how this works. He turned toward the rest of the cabin. For everyone's awareness, this is about airline policy and safety. Nothing more. That was when a voice finally pushed back. Then explain the policy, said a man in 3C, calm, measured. Because I fly this route every week, and I've never seen someone denied water in crews. Whitaker locked eyes with him. Sir, unless you're part of the flight crew, you can remain silent. The man held his gaze. I am silent. I'm also recording. A flicker, just a flicker, crossed Whitaker's face. He smiled thinly. That's cute. You think your phone scares me? He leaned down toward Malik again, voice dropping, sharpened. Let me tell you how this ends. You stay quiet, we land, you walk off, and this goes away. Or you keep pushing, and I mark you disruptive. Then we have paperwork, security, maybe even a diversion. A hush fell. The word diversion sucked the oxygen from the cabin. You'd land the plane, Malik asked quietly. Because I asked for water? Whitaker straightened. I'd land the plane because you refused to follow crew instructions. I am following them, Malik replied. I'm seated. I'm calm. Whitaker laughed. You think calm gets you points? Calm just means you're hiding something. Behind Malik, someone's phone chimed. An incoming text. Another passenger angled their screen lower, more discreet now. This wasn't entertainment anymore. It was documentation. The lead flight attendant cleared her throat. Captain, with respect, we are escalating this unnecessarily. Whitaker rounded on her. Are you questioning my judgment? No, she said carefully. I'm concerned about proportional response. Write that concern down, Whitaker snapped, and write that he's non-compliant. Malik looked up at her. Please don't write something that isn't true. Her eyes met his. Conflict tore across her face. Career versus conscience. She said nothing. Whitaker exhaled sharply, then turned toward the galley, beckoning her, with a crook of his finger. With me. As they stepped away, Malik heard him hiss. If you undermine me in front of passengers again, you won't like the consequences. She didn't answer. Whitaker returned alone moments later, more rigid, more brittle. Decision made, he announced. This passenger will remain seated for the remainder of the flight. No forward lavatory access, minimal service. A murmur of protest rippled. That's not right, someone said. Whitaker raised his voice. This is a commercial airline, not a democracy. Malik's fingers tightened once on the armrest. Then he relaxed them. He unlocked his phone again, not to record video, but to open an email thread already starred, already prepared. He didn't show it yet. He didn't need to. Not yet. He simply asked, Captain, am I being detained? Whitaker's head snapped toward him. Excuse me? Am I free to use the restroom? Malik continued. Or am I being detained in my seat? The question was precise, legal, calm. Whitaker stared at him, measuring. Around them, the cabin leaned in. You're being instructed, Whitaker said finally. And if you refuse, yes, I'll consider that interference with crew duties. There it was. A passenger in 2A quietly started an audio recording and labeled it with shaking hands. The man in 3C nodded once, as if confirming a hypothesis. Malik set his phone face down again. Understood, he said. I will remain seated. Whitaker turned away, satisfied, unaware that the line he had just crossed was not one of discipline, but of exposure. As the engines hummed steadily westward, something irreversible settled over the cabin. The shared understanding that this was no longer about rules. It was about power, and power, when misused in front of witnesses, never travels alone. It drags consequences behind it, whether the person wielding it believes it or not. The humiliation didn't end when the captain walked away. It settled. It seeped into the first-class cabin like recycled air, thin, stale, unavoidable. Every minute that passed without water, without movement, without relief, sharpened the message being delivered to Malik and everyone watching. This is what happens when power decides you don't deserve comfort. The seatbelt sign flicked on. No turbulence, no announcement, just the light. Whitaker had done it on purpose. The lead flight attendant paused mid-aisle, confused. She glanced toward the cockpit. No call button, no request, just control. Malik noticed. Of course he did. He shifted slightly in his seat, careful, deliberate. His bladder ached now, an unglamorous human detail that humiliation always exploits. He didn't cross his legs. He didn't fidget. He refused to look uncomfortable. Across the aisle, a woman in her 40s leaned forward and whispered, "This is cruel." Her husband murmured back, "Don't get involved." Whitaker's voice suddenly cut through the cabin speakers. Not the PA, just loud enough. Everyone remained seated. Heads turned. He stepped back into the cabin, posture rigid, jaw tight. The smile from earlier was gone. This wasn't performance anymore. This was enforcement. He stopped beside Malik's row. "Still quiet?" he asked. "Good. That means you're learning." Malik looked up slowly. "Captain, I'm in pain." A few passengers inhaled sharply. Whitaker tilted his head. "Pain is subjective. It's also unnecessary," Malik replied. "I've asked respectfully. I've complied. There is no policy justification for—" Whitaker slammed his palm against the overhead bin. The sound cracked like a gunshot. "Enough!" he barked. "You don't get to lecture me on policy. I am the policy up here." The lead flight attendant flinched. Whitaker turned to her. "Did I authorize you to offer him anything?" "No, sir," she said quietly. "Then stand there," he ordered, "and make sure he stays put." She obeyed again, this time with tears burning behind her eyes. A man in 2B stood halfway out of his seat. "Captain, this is harassment." Whitaker spun. "Sir, sit down. You're denying a kid basic." "Sit down." Whitaker pointed sharply. "Unless you want to be next." The man hesitated, then slowly sat. Shame spread across his face. That was the moment the cabin crossed from discomfort into something darker. Collective guilt. Malik felt it. The weight of being the one everyone watched, but no one saved. He unlocked his phone again. This time, he didn't type notes. He opened the email. He read it once more, not for reassurance, but for precision. Names, clauses, timelines. The words legal accountability and duty of care sat there like anchors. He didn't show it yet. He wasn't ready. Whitaker noticed the phone. "What did I say about that device?" He snapped. "I'm not recording," Malik said truthfully. "That's not the point," Whitaker replied. "The point is control." He gestured toward the galley. "I'm calling this in. If you think you're uncomfortable now, wait until we land." A ripple of whispers followed him. "This is going too far," someone said. "Why isn't anyone stopping him?" "Because he's the captain." That last line was the truth, and the problem. In the galley, Whitaker spoke in low, urgent tones into the interphone. Words drifted back in fragments: document, non-compliance, pattern, safety concern. He wasn't just improvising anymore. He was building a narrative. And narratives, Malik knew, were how institutions erased people. The lead flight attendant returned to her post, hands shaking. Malik looked up at her. "You don't have to do this," she swallowed. "I do if I want to keep my job." Malik nodded once. He understood more than she knew. Minutes passed, long ones. The cabin grew restless. A child in economy cried somewhere far behind them, life continuing normally where cruelty wasn't being staged. Then a new figure appeared. A man in a dark jacket, mid-50s, calm eyes, rose from seat 2A and stepped into the aisle. He didn't raise his voice. "Captain," he said, "I'd like your name for my report." Whitaker froze. Slowly, he turned. "Excuse me?" "I'm documenting what I've witnessed," the man continued. "Denial of restroom access, denial of water, intimidation. I need your full name." Whitaker laughed. a brittle sound. "You think this is a courtroom?" "No," the man said. "I think this is a record." Whitaker stepped closer, towering. "Sit down before you embarrass yourself." The man held his ground. "With respect, you're already doing that." A murmur surged. Phones were no longer hidden. Whitaker's face flushed. "You have no idea what you're interfering with," the man replied evenly. "I have a very good idea. I work in compliance." That word landed like a dropped tray. Whitaker's eyes flicked once to Malik. For the first time, uncertainty crept in. "You," Whitaker snapped, pointing at Malik. "What is this really about?" Malik met his gaze, calm, steady. "It's about whether rules apply to everyone," he said, "including you." Whitaker scoffed, but his voice cracked at the edges. "Don't flatter yourself. You're just another kid who thought first class made him equal." Malik inhaled. "I never thought that." He unlocked his phone and turned the screen toward the lead flight attendant. Not Whitaker. Respect where it mattered. "Ma'am," Malik said softly, "this flight is part of an anonymous anti-discrimination evaluation program your airline signed last year. I was assigned to observe and document treatment after prior complaints involving this route." Silence detonated. The flight attendant stared at the screen. Her breath caught. She scrolled, her face drained of color. Whitaker lunged forward. "That's not authorized information." The man from 2A spoke again. "It is now." Whitaker straightened, voice rising. "This is entrapment." "No," Malik said. "This is corporate negligence being observed in real time." The words sliced through the cabin. Whitaker's authority, the thing he had leaned on like a weapon, suddenly looked fragile, exposed, documented. "You don't get to decide that," Whitaker snapped. "I don't," Malik agreed. "The evidence does." The lead flight attendant stepped back, away from Whitaker toward Malik. A small move, a seismic one. "I need to file a report," she said quietly. "Immediately." Whitaker's jaw tightened. "You will do no such thing." She met his eyes. "I will, because now it's my liability too." The cabin exhaled as one. Whitaker realized, too late, what had shifted. This was no longer a customer service issue, no longer a disciplinary lesson, no longer something a uniform could smother. This was legal accountability knocking, softly, relentlessly on the cockpit door, and every witness in the cabin had just become part of the answer. The moment the lead flight attendant said the word report, the temperature in the cabin changed, not louder, colder. Captain Whitaker didn't shout. He didn't need to. He straightened his shoulders, adjusted the cuffs of his uniform, and did something far more dangerous than anger. He recalculated. "That won't be necessary," he said evenly. "You're overreacting." The lead flight attendant, Rachel, 38, Latina, 10 years with the airline, reputation spotless, held her ground. Her hands were shaking, but her voice wasn't. "Sir, a passenger has alleged discriminatory treatment, and I've personally witnessed—" Whitaker lifted a finger. "Rachel, galley, now." The way he said her name was a warning shot. She hesitated only a second, then followed him forward. As they disappeared behind the curtain, the first-class cabin held its breath. Phones stayed raised. Audio continued rolling. The witnesses knew better now than to stop. Malik stayed seated, back straight, eyes forward. He could hear fragments from the galley, muffled but sharp. "Career suicide. You don't understand the stakes. I'll write you up before you finish typing." Rachel's voice cracked once. "I'm not falsifying a report." Whitaker's voice dropped lower. "Then you're choosing sides." "That's not what this is," she said. "It always is." The curtain snapped open. Whitaker returned alone. He scanned the cabin like a general assessing a battlefield that had betrayed him. His gaze lingered on Malik, then slid to the man in 2A, the compliance witness, then to the phones. He made a decision. "Attention," he announced, voice clipped and professional. Due to an unresolved safety concern, we are evaluating a possible diversion. The word hit harder this time. Diversion. It wasn't just humiliation anymore. It was escalation. Official, irreversible, recorded. A woman gasped. Someone whispered, "He can't be serious." Malik looked up. "Captain," he said calmly, "what safety concern?" Whitaker ignored him. He turned toward the lead flight attendant station and pressed the interphone. "Cockpit to operations." Rachel reappeared, pale. "Captain, you don't need to." Whitaker cut her off. "I absolutely do." He faced the cabin again. "For everyone's awareness, interference with crew duties is a federal offense. I will not hesitate to act." The compliance witness in 2A spoke up, measured. "Captain, you're invoking diversion authority without articulating a threat. That itself raises questions." Whitaker's jaw flexed. "Sir, sit down." "I am seated," the man replied, "and I'm documenting." Whitaker's eyes flicked, again, to Malik. "You," Whitaker said, pointing. "This stops now. Unlock your phone. Hand it to the flight attendant." Malik shook his head slowly. "I can't do that. That's a direct order." "I understand," Malik replied, "and I'm declining." A murmur surged. Whitaker took a step closer, looming. "You think you're protected? You're a minor causing a disruption on a commercial flight." "I'm a passenger asserting my rights," Malik said, calmly. Whitaker laughed, sharp and humorless. "Rights, always rights. You people memorize the word but never the limits." Rachel stepped forward. "Captain, please." Whitaker turned on her. "Stay out of this." She didn't move. "I won't," she said quietly. That was when Whitaker crossed the line he would never uncross. He raised his voice and said, clearly, for the record, "If this passenger does not surrender his device, I will instruct security to detain him upon landing, and I will recommend charges." Silence slammed down. Even the engines seemed to recede. Malik felt his chest tighten, not with fear, but with something colder. He had expected hostility. He had not expected this level of reckless certainty. He looked at Rachel. "Ma'am," he said gently, "please document exactly what he just said." Her eyes filled. She nodded. Whitaker realized, too late, that the cabin had shifted from audience to jury. The compliance witness stood again. "Captain, you are threatening detention without cause. That is unlawful," Whitaker snapped. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I do," the man replied, "and so does every phone in this cabin." Whitaker spun toward Malik, voice dropping to a hiss. "You think this ends well for you?" Malik met his eyes. "I think it ends truthfully." Whitaker straightened, abruptly, as if remembering himself. He turned and strode toward the cockpit, barking into the interphone. "Lock the cockpit door!" A few passengers gasped. Rachel hurried after him. "Captain, please don't!" The cockpit door closed with a heavy, mechanical thud. Locked. That sound, the unmistakable seal of authority, reverberated through the cabin. Malik exhaled slowly. This was the moment the story tipped from internal abuse to something far more dangerous. Inside the cockpit, Whitaker paced, sweat beaded at his temples. He spoke rapidly into the headset now. "Operations? This is Captain Whitaker. I am declaring a potential security issue involving a non-compliant passenger in first class." A pause. Yes, I understand protocol. I'm requesting guidance on diversion options." Another pause, longer. Whitaker's face tightened. "I have reason to believe the passenger is attempting to provoke an incident." He listened. His knuckles whitened around the armrest. Outside in the cabin, Rachel stood frozen. She looked at Malik, then at the witnesses. "I need to file an immediate internal report," she said, "and I need names. Anyone willing." Hands rose, not all at once, but enough. The man in 2A nodded. "I'll submit mine now." A woman in 3B said, "Me too." Another voice. I got everything on video. Rachel swallowed hard and began typing. Malik didn't smile. He didn't relax, because he knew what Whitaker was trying to do. The captain wasn't just threatening diversion anymore. He was building a preemptive strike, a narrative that would paint Malik as the problem, justify the escalation, and bury the truth under procedure. That was the trap, and Whitaker had just stepped deeper into it. The cockpit door remained closed. Minutes ticked by. Then, finally, it opened. Whitaker emerged, face composed, but eyes burning. Decision made, he announced. We are not diverting yet, but this situation is now under formal review. Rachel stared at him. By whom? Whitaker met her gaze. By me. A few passengers scoffed. Malik spoke calmly. Captain, for clarity, are you asserting sole authority over an incident that now involves external reporting? Whitaker glared. I am the final authority on this aircraft. Malik nodded once. Understood. He unlocked his phone, not to show Rachel this time, but to forward an email. He tapped send. Whitaker noticed the movement. What did you just do? Malik looked up. I notified the external partner that escalation has occurred. The words hung there. Whitaker felt it then, the ground shifting beneath his feet. The realization that the threat he'd deployed had done the opposite of what he intended. It hadn't silenced the situation. It had changed its jurisdiction. This was no longer just an airline problem, no longer something reputation management could contain, no longer something authority could bully into submission. The witnesses knew it, Rachel knew it, and deep down, despite everything, Whitaker knew it too. The threat had emerged, and it had locked him into a trap of his own making. For the next 10 minutes, Captain Whitaker pretended he still owned the sky. The cockpit door remained closed, not out of necessity, but symbolism. Inside, Whitaker sat rigidly in the left seat, headset on, eyes fixed forward as if altitude and heading could drown out what was happening behind him. He spoke in clipped, careful phrases now, every word shaped for a report that had not yet been written. In the cabin, silence returned. But it was a different silence. Not fear, not submission, calculation. Rachel stood near the forward galley, tablet in hand, fingers hovering over the keyboard. She hadn't submitted the report yet. Not because she was hesitating, but because she was being precise. Timestamps, verbatim quotes, witness seat numbers. She had learned something in the last 30 minutes that training never taught her. If you write it exactly as it happened, you don't need to explain yourself. Malik sat in 1A, posture unchanged. His breathing was steady, but his body was starting to protest in ways discipline couldn't fully mask. He felt the pressure in his bladder, the dry ache in his throat. Still, he did not move. Across the aisle, the compliance witness in 2A watched Whitaker's shadow under the cockpit door. He had seen this pattern before, not in planes, but in institutions. When power senses exposure, it does one of two things. It retreats, or it counterattacks. Whitaker chose the latter. The interphone chimed. Rachel answered. Forward cabin. Whitaker's voice came through, measured, almost pleasant. Rachel, I need you to collect written statements from the crew, immediately. Her stomach dropped. Captain, I'm in the middle of... I know exactly what you're in the middle of. Whitaker interrupted. That's why I'm clarifying procedure. We need to document passenger behavior before it gets distorted. Rachel closed her eyes briefly, then opened them. Understood. For accuracy, I'll be documenting crew behavior as well. A pause. That won't be necessary, Whitaker replied. Rachel's fingers tightened around the tablet. It is. The line went dead. A few rows back, a woman whispered, Did he just try to flip it on the kid? Yes, the man beside her replied. And it's not working. Whitaker re-emerged moments later, jacket removed now, sleeves rolled up, like a man ready to handle things. He walked straight to Malik's row, stopping just short of invading his space. You've made your point, Whitaker said quietly. Now, let's end this. Malik looked up. I'm not the one escalating. Whitaker leaned closer. Listen carefully. If you cooperate, this stays small. I'll notice misunderstanding. You walk off, no charges, no drama. And if I don't, Whitaker smiled thinly. Then we let the process do what it does to people like you. The cruelty was no longer loud. It was surgical. Malik felt a familiar pressure behind his eyes. Not tears, but anger restrained so tightly it hummed. He exhaled slowly and said, "Captain, I'm required to inform you that I cannot agree to any resolution that interferes with documentation." Whitaker's eyes narrowed. Required by whom? Malik didn't answer immediately. That was when Whitaker made his false reveal. The story he believed would reassert dominance. He straightened and addressed the cabin. For transparency, this passenger has refused multiple lawful crew instructions. He is being documented for non-compliance. A ripple of disbelief followed. The compliance witness stood. That's not what we observed. Whitaker snapped, "Sir, sit down." "I am standing," the man replied calmly, "and I'm correcting the record." Phones rose again. Rachel stepped forward. "Captain, with respect, that statement is inaccurate." Whitaker rounded on her. "Are you siding with a disruptive passenger over your captain?" She swallowed, then said clearly, "I am siding with the truth." That was the moment the false reveal collapsed. Whitaker turned back to Malik, voice low and urgent. "What do you really want?" Malik looked at him, not with triumph, not with fear, but with something close to pity. "The truth documented," he said. "That's all." He unlocked his phone. This time, he didn't angle it discreetly. He turned the screen outward, toward Rachel, or toward the compliance witness, toward the camera lenses already recording. "Ma'am," Malik said to Rachel, "this is the assignment letter. Please scroll." She did. Her breath caught. The email bore official headers, legal language, signatures she recognized. It outlined an anonymous anti-discrimination evaluation program, partnered with a civil rights organization, triggered by prior complaints that referenced this route, this cabin, and this captain. Rachel's hands trembled as she read. Whitaker lunged forward. "That document is confidential." "It's mine," Malik replied, "and it authorizes me to preserve evidence." The compliance witness leaned in, reading. "This is legitimate." Whitaker's face drained of color. "You planned this," he accused. "No," Malik said evenly. "I expected professionalism." The cabin erupted, not in cheers, but in something heavier. Vindication mixed with shame. Whitaker backed away a step, then another. "This is entrapment." Rachel shook her head. "No, Captain. This is observation." Whitaker turned sharply toward the cockpit, then stopped. For the first time, he seemed unsure where authority actually lived. Rachel spoke again, voice steady now. "I'm submitting the report." She tapped send. A small sound, a massive consequence. Whitaker whispered, "You don't know what you've just done." Rachel met his eyes. "I know exactly what I've done." Malik closed his phone and set it down. The balance had shifted, not because of outrage, not because of noise, but because the truth had entered the system. And systems, once engaged, do not forget. Whitaker retreated toward the cockpit, shoulders tight, mind racing. He had lost control of the narrative. Worse, he had created a record, but he wasn't finished. Not yet. Because if he couldn't silence the truth, he could still punish the messenger. As the cockpit door closed behind him, Rachel felt a chill she couldn't explain. She looked at Malik. "What happens now?" Malik didn't answer right away. He stared at the cockpit door, the place where power hid when it realized it had been seen. "Now," he said quietly, "he decides whether to make it worse. If you've ever watched authority twist the story to protect itself, stay with us. Subscribe, and stand with dignity voices, because what the captain does next will determine whether this ends as accountability or something far more serious. In the next, the captain launches his counterattack, and crosses a line that turns this from an internal airline issue into a potential federal case. The counterattack didn't begin with shouting. It began with procedure. Inside the cockpit, Captain Whitaker sat rigidly, headset on, eyes fixed on the instrument panel as if numbers could absolve intent. His voice, when he spoke into the interphone, was calm, almost courteous. "Operations. This is Whitaker. I'm initiating a formal incident escalation." He chose each word like a blade. In the cabin, Rachel felt it before she heard it. The shift that comes when authority stops pretending and starts weaponizing systems. The interphone chimed again. "Forward cabin," she answered. Whitaker's voice emerged controlled and precise. "Rachel, you are instructed to secure the device used by the minor passenger. It is interfering with crew duties." Her heart thudded. "Captain, he is not interfering." "That's not your determination to make." "It is when it's inaccurate." A pause stretched thin. Whitaker replied, "If you fail to comply, I will note insubordination." Rachel closed her eyes briefly, then opened them. "Understood. Please document this instruction." The line went silent. Malik watched her carefully. "He's going to try to flip it," he said softly. She nodded. "I know." Moments later, the cockpit door opened. Whitaker stepped out with a new energy, sharp, focused, almost serene, the kind of calm that comes when someone believes they've found a legal angle. "Attention," he announced to the first-class cabin. "Due to continued non-compliance by a passenger, I am escalating this incident." He turned to Malik. "You are now interfering with crew duties by refusing to surrender an electronic device upon instruction." Malik remained seated. "Captain, I have not been instructed by any lawful authority to surrender my phone. I am preserving evidence as authorized." Whitaker smiled faintly. "You don't get to decide what's lawful up here." The compliance witness in 2A stood. "Captain, you are creating exposure." Whitaker snapped, "Sit down." "I won't." Rachel stepped forward. "Captain, please reconsider." Whitaker's eyes hardened. "This is my aircraft." The security officer, deadheading, uniform crisp but posture uncertain, shifted near the bulkhead. Whitaker beckoned him with 2 fingers. "Officer," Whitaker said, voice projecting, "stand by seat 1A. Prepare to assist if this passenger refuses further instructions." A collective gasp rippled. The officer hesitated. "Captain, what's the nature of the threat?" Whitaker didn't miss a beat. "Potential interference. Possible escalation." Malik spoke calmly. "Sir, I am not a threat. I am seated. I am compliant. I am documenting discriminatory treatment." The officer glanced at Malik, then at Rachel, then at the phone's recording. Sweat dotted his brow. Whitaker raised his voice. "This is your final warning. Unlock the phone. Hand it over." Malik shook his head slowly. "I can't." Whitaker's voice sharpened. "Then you leave me no choice." Rachel felt her stomach drop. "Captain, stop." Whitaker ignored her and addressed the officer. "Proceed." The officer didn't move. Seconds stretched. "I said proceed," Whitaker repeated. The officer swallowed. "Sir, I need a clear threat articulation." Whitaker stared at him. "I am the threat articulation." That line, arrogant, damning, was caught by at least 6 devices. The compliance witness spoke again, louder now. "Captain, you are ordering detention without cause. That is unlawful." Whitaker snapped, "You're not qualified to say that." "I am," the man replied evenly. "And so are the lawyers watching this later." Whitaker's jaw clenched. His eyes darted. To Malik, to Rachel, to the officer, calculating risk. Then he pivoted. "Fine," he said abruptly. "New instruction." He turned to the cabin. "We will prepare for potential diversion if this passenger continues to refuse compliance." A wave of shock rolled through the cabin. Rachel stepped directly between Whitaker and Malik. "Captain, this is abuse of authority." Whitaker leaned in close to her ear, voice low and venomous. "Get out of my way." She didn't. "You're making this worse," she said quietly. Whitaker straightened and did something reckless. He raised his voice and said clearly, "For the record, I am ordering the preservation of the cockpit voice recorder to be suspended due to an ongoing security situation." Rachel froze. The compliance witness's eyes widened. Malik felt the air leave his lungs. Not fear, but clarity. "That's obstruction," Malik said calmly. Whitaker rounded on him. "You don't get to speak." Rachel found her voice. "Captain, you cannot suspend preservation. That violates protocol." Whitaker snapped, "I am invoking emergency discretion." "There is no emergency," Rachel said, "and you know it." Phones were no longer just recording. They were witnessing. Whitaker realized too late what he had done. By attempting to interfere with evidence retention, he had crossed the boundary from internal misconduct into something far more serious. The cockpit door opened again, not because Whitaker wanted it to, but because operations demanded it. "Captain," came a voice over the interphone, firm, unmistakable. "We are receiving multiple reports from the cabin." Whitaker stiffened. "Operations. This situation is under control." "Negative," the voice replied. "Stand by for instructions." Whitaker's face flushed. Rachel looked at Malik. He just lost control. Malik nodded once. "This is the point of no return." Whitaker tried one last move. He turned to the officer again. "Escort the passenger to the rear cabin." The officer shook his head. "I can't do that without cause." Whitaker hissed, "I'm giving you cause." The officer met his eyes. "Not enough." Silence fell. Heavy. Final. Whitaker stood alone in the aisle, authority evaporating in real time. The systems he had trusted to protect him were now documenting him. Operations came through again. "Captain Whitaker, you are instructed to de-escalate immediately." Rachel exhaled shakily. Whitaker didn't respond. Instead, he turned and walked back into the cockpit, slamming the door behind him. The cabin released a collective breath. Rachel moved to Hu. Malik sighed. "Are you okay?" He nodded. "I will be." The compliance witness sat down slowly. He just turned an internal issue into a career-ending one. Malik looked toward the cockpit door, the sealed room where power once hid. "He did more than that," Malik said quietly. "He turned it into something he can't outrun." The plane continued westward, engines steady, altitude unchanged. But the situation had crossed a line no altitude could smooth over. This was no longer about discrimination alone. It was about what happens when authority, exposed, chooses escalation over accountability. And when the plane landed, the ground would not be kind. The landing was smooth. That was the cruelest part. No jolt, no shudder, no turbulence to match what had already happened inside the aircraft. The wheels kissed the runway at San Francisco International as if nothing had gone wrong at all, as if humiliation, threats, and abuse of authority could be reduced to a line item in a report. The cabin stayed quiet during taxi. No applause, no chatter, just the soft mechanical clicks of seatbelts releasing and the low hum of engines powering down. People avoided each other's eyes, not out of ignorance, but because they now shared something heavy. They had all seen it. The seatbelt sign went dark. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to San Francisco." Whitaker's voice came over the PA, controlled, neutral, professional, as if he hadn't tried to weaponize a diversion an hour earlier, as if the cockpit hadn't been a locked room of panic. Malik didn't move. Rachel leaned toward him. "You don't have to rush," she said quietly. He nodded. "I know." The compliance witness in 2A was already packing his bag with deliberate care. He looked back once, just once, at the cockpit door. He knew what waited on the other side. The aircraft door opened. Two figures appeared at the jet bridge. Not uniformed police, not security in a rush, but airline operations personnel. Calm, clipboards in hand. The kind of calm that means decisions have already been made elsewhere. Rachel stiffened. Whitaker emerged from the cockpit moments later, jacket back on, wings pinned carefully to his chest. He looked composed, but his eyes betrayed him. They darted, calculating, searching for something that was no longer there. Control. An operations manager stepped forward. Captain Whitaker? Whitaker nodded. Yes? Please come with us. Whitaker hesitated. I need to debrief with my crew. That won't be necessary, the manager replied. Polite. Final. Your duties are concluded for this flight. The words landed like a quiet gavel. Rachel inhaled sharply. The cabin collectively froze. Whitaker forced a smile. On what grounds? Pending review, the manager said. Effective immediately. Whitaker's jaw tightened. He glanced toward Malik, just once. Not with rage, not with contempt, with fear. As Whitaker was escorted down the jet bridge, not in handcuffs, not in spectacle, the passengers watched. Some filmed, others couldn't bring themselves to. Malik remained seated. He waited until the aisle cleared, until the power dynamics had fully reversed. Not dramatically, but procedurally. Then he stood, stretched stiff legs, and shouldered his backpack. Rachel walked beside him. I filed everything, she said. Every word, every instruction. I know, Malik replied. Thank you. At the gate, the compliance witness stopped them. I submitted my statement, he said. So did at least 9 others. Malik nodded. That matters. On the other side of the terminal glass, Whitaker stood with a union representative now. Voices were low, urgent. Papers appeared. Suspension notice, administrative leave, a timeline of next steps. The wings on his chest looked suddenly ornamental, heavy. His phone buzzed. A message. From home. He didn't open it. He already knew. The consequences rippled outward quickly, but not loudly. No press conference, no announcement, just process. By the time Malik reached baggage claim, the airline's legal department had already opened a case file labeled Pattern Review. Past complaints, dismissed, minimized, buried, were pulled from digital archives and stacked like cards that had been waiting for a breeze. By the time Whitaker reached the employee shuttle, his access badge had been deactivated. He tried it twice. The second red flash felt personal. At home that night, Whitaker's wife watched a muted clip on her phone, his voice unmistakable, even without sound. She looked up when he entered the room. Is it true? She asked. Whitaker opened his mouth. Nothing came out. At school the next morning, his son heard the whispers before he saw the link. He didn't click it. He didn't need to. The shame traveled faster than facts ever did. Malik sat in a small conference room the following day. Not for interrogation, not for spectacle, but for confirmation. 2 airline representatives, 1 civil rights liaison. Rachel joined by video, posture straighter than Malik had ever seen it. Compensation is available, one executive said carefully, given the severity. Malik listened. He had practiced this moment in his head, not with anger, but clarity. I don't want personal compensation, he said. The room stilled. The liaison raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? Yes, Malik replied. I want something else. They leaned in. A legal support fund, Malik continued, voice steady. For passengers who face discrimination and don't have documentation, witnesses, or the ability to withstand pressure. And mandatory training that protects crew members from retaliation when they report misconduct. Silence followed. Then Rachel spoke. That would have helped me yesterday. The executive nodded slowly. That's doable. Malik added, and a review process that doesn't wait for patterns to become headlines. Pens moved. This was the real price. Not money, not headlines, but structural change. The kind that doesn't make anyone feel heroic, but makes harm harder to repeat. Weeks later, a memo circulated quietly within the airline. Captain Grant Whitaker, termination pending final review. Multiple prior complaints reopened, external oversight initiated. No adjectives, no drama, just facts. At the gate where Malik had boarded weeks earlier, a new placard appeared near the service desk. Passenger rights and reporting pathway discrimination will be documented. Retaliation will not be tolerated. Most travelers walked past it without reading, but some stopped, and that was enough. On a late afternoon flight weeks later, Malik boarded another plane. Different crew, different route, same calm posture. As he settled into his seat, a woman across the aisle hesitated, then leaned forward. "I was on that flight," she said softly. "The one with the captain." Malik looked up. She swallowed. "I didn't speak up. I'm sorry." Malik held her gaze for a moment. Then he nodded once. "That's okay," he said. "You're speaking now." She smiled, relieved. The plane pushed back from the gate. No threats, no humiliation, just motion. And somewhere, far from this quiet cabin, a man who once believed authority made him untouchable was learning the cost of confusing power with permission. The price had been paid, not loudly, not violently, but completely. The meeting room didn't look like justice. No flags, no raised voices, no dramatic music swelling in the background. Just a long table, a glass wall overlooking the city, and a thin folder placed carefully in front of Malik. On the cover, settlement agreement. The airline's senior vice president sat across from him, hands folded. To her left, a legal counsel. To her right, a communications executive whose entire job revolved around reputation management, how to contain damage without ever admitting the word fault. But today, something was different. "We want to begin," the vice president said, "with an executive apology." She didn't read it from paper. She spoke it. She acknowledged the discrimination. She acknowledged the abuse of authority. She acknowledged the failure, not of one individual alone, but of systems that allowed behavior to continue unchecked. Malik listened without expression, not because it didn't matter, but because apologies, like power, only mean something when they're followed by action. The counsel slid the folder forward. This agreement includes financial compensation, confidentiality terms, and, at your request, the establishment of a legal support fund for passengers who experience discrimination. Malik opened the folder slowly. The fund was there. Real numbers, real timelines, oversight by an independent partner, mandatory documentation protections for crew, a reworked escalation pathway that removed sole authority from a single captain when discrimination complaints were raised. This wasn't a press release. This was brand accountability written into policy. "I'll sign," Malik said finally, "with one condition." The room leaned in. "No non-disclosure clause," he said. "The story doesn't need names, but the lesson needs daylight." The communications executive shifted uncomfortably. The vice president nodded once. "Agreed." Malik signed. No smile, no victory lap. Just a pen lifted, a page turned, and a system permanently altered. Weeks later, the airline released a short statement. No dramatics, no defensive language, just acknowledgement and change. Captain Grant Whitaker's name never appeared publicly. But inside the company, it did. Termination finalized, license under review. Prior, complaint substantiated. Not because Malik wanted punishment, but because truth demands consequences. At a training facility outside Atlanta, Rachel stood in front of a new class of flight attendants. On the screen behind her were 3 words, newly added to the manual: document, protect, escalate. "This isn't about defiance," she told them. "It's about dignity, yours and the passengers." In a quiet terminal one morning, Malik walked past the same gate where it had begun, the same carpet, the same announcements. But near the desk stood a small sign that hadn't been there before. "If you experience discrimination, you have the right to report without retaliation." A man reading it nodded slowly. A woman took a photo. Malik kept walking. No one stopped him. No one tested him. No one needed to. The loop was closed, not with spectacle, but with record. And that was enough. Malik, the protagonist, never raises his voice. He never insults back. He never tries to win in the way power expects conflict to look. His strength is discipline, the kind that understands systems better than ego. Malik represents a truth many underestimate. Silence, when intentional and documented, can be more dangerous to injustice than outrage. Captain Whitaker, the antagonist, is not a monster in costume. He is far more familiar and far more frightening. He believes authority is the same as righteousness. He confuses control with competence and tradition with entitlement. His downfall isn't caused by one bad moment, but by a long habit of being protected by systems that mistook silence for absence of harm. The story isn't about airplanes. It's about how discrimination often hides behind procedure, how abuse often wears a uniform, and how change rarely begins with shouting, but with someone calm enough to keep a record when everyone else is afraid. If there is a message here, it is this: systems only change when evidence enters them. Not rumors, not rage, evidence. And evidence requires courage from victims, from witnesses, and from those inside institutions who choose truth over comfort. In daily life, most of us won't face a cockpit or a captain, but we will face moments where power tests whether we're paying attention. A workplace, a classroom, a public space. When that moment comes, the lesson of this story is not fight louder. It is stand steady. Document what happens, support those being targeted, and don't let silence mean erasure. Because dignity is not something you ask for. It's something you insist be recorded. If the story made you pause, reflect, or see the world a little more clearly, subscribe to Dignity Voices. Here we tell the stories that don't shout but still change systems.